Welcome to the Apple Insider Podcast. This is your host, Stephen Robles, and exciting news this week. The HomePod is back, the big version. We're going to talk about that, plus M2 Pro and M2 Max announced alongside new MacBook Pros, new Mac Mini. So much news. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Collide and ZocDoc, where you can find and book a doctor right in the free app. And joining me to talk about all the M2 and HomePod news, my friend Wes Hilliard. How's it going, Wes?
I think I'm most excited about temperature and humidity sensors this week. That's pretty exciting.
I'm excited about that too. I mean, HomePod Mini gets some new features like 2 years later. So very exciting. So we're going to get into all of that. You know, I think the most important news this week, which I know William is going to be very interested in, is Ted Lasso Season 3 is coming this spring, probably the final season. So
Apple announced like 8 trailers and 10 TV shows yesterday. It was kind of insane.
It is insane. Looking forward to Ted Lasso. You know, I think hopefully they land it. You know, the first season I still think is kind of like the best. Second season was a good. I hope they stick the landing on season 3 and end with a bang. So looking forward to that. Also wanted to mention real quick, the Apple Insider Daily Podcast. You might hear some familiar voices on it this past week. There was a random announcement in there that it was no longer happening. That's not the case. And actually, you will hear myself on a couple episodes this week and Mr. Gallagher. You'll actually hear his voice doing that daily podcast periodically as well. So do not worry. The Apple Insider Daily is there to stay, and we will put a link in the show notes to subscribe to that as well. Before we get to all the big news, I did just want to mention one thing, because we talked about Apple Music Sing when that came out last year, you know, back in December. I just want to mention, I actually used it on an Apple TV. We had a friend over, and the entire family was singing to The Greatest Showman, and we were using Apple Music Sing on the Apple TV, lowered the vocals and singing along, and it was a lot of fun. So just 2 thumbs up, Apple Music Sing. Have you done it at all? Have you done like private karaoke there?
Steven, I'm just imagining the movie, I believe it's Step Brothers, where that family just randomly sings together in the car. I'm sorry.
That is us.
I tried it a couple of times. I've showed it to some friends that we were visiting with, and everyone found it pretty impressive. Turning down the vocals is really fun. So I think it's one of those like secret features that people are just going to randomly post on TikTok and get 1 million views. Be like, did you know this worked this way?
Yes.
You know.
And I think that has happened. But yes, on the Apple TV, it's a little harder to find to get, you have to make the lyrics appear first with the little speech bubble, and then the microphone will appear. So it's a little, couple more steps on Apple TV, it seemed like.
It's impressive, the reach that it has. Like we were going through different tracks, and I found some like anime music that was supported by this feature, with Japanese characters and all showing up on screen.
That's wild.
It would be helpful if they put up the Romanized version of it, English alphabet, sure. But still saying the Japanese words, but it's spelt out, right?
That would be helpful. All right. Well, I'm going to say we basically had a quasi-Apple event this week, because Apple was just dropping press releases left and right. We even got an 18-minute keynote video published to the Apple YouTube channel. Some clues in the keynote video actually alluded to the fact that this was scheduled for 2022. If you copy the URL on Apple's Watch the Announcement button, the URL address actually includes the year 2022. So it seems like this was that fated event, or that phantom event that was supposed to happen maybe at the end of last year. But just this week, and we'll go in more into detail to all of these things, but for Black History Month, they announced the new Unity Sport Loop and talk about the Unity Mosaic watch face, the featured Pan-African flag, and there's going to be Black History Month content in news, podcast, books. That was one press release. And then new MacBook Pros with the M2 Pro and M2 Max chips, the M2 and M2 Pro Mac Mini, and then the new big HomePod, or the big HomePod, is back. So we're going to talk about all of that.
Wait, so you mean to tell me that Apple didn't announce new airports?
No, I'm sorry. Andrew O'Hara tweeted a photoshopped image saying Airport Ultra now announced. And apparently he had like some very angry replies because people were upset because they thought it was real.
It was mildly convincing, but the font was too big on the Learn More and Order Now. So
yeah, see, and I thought the title fun, if it was bold, because Apple's been doing like bold titles a lot for like the actual product name. But anyway. Yeah, he made a lot of people mad with that. Now, I do kind of wish that 18-minute keynote video included the HomePod in it. The video was just about the MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, M2 Pro, M2 Max.
But it would ruin the surprise, Stephen.
That is true. It was surprising. It does really feel like there was a lot of jokes going around on Twitter where it was like, this was the first 18 minutes of a video keynote that also included something else, maybe Apple VR or something.
I saw those and I was like, no. I mean, Apple's they're more calculating than that. I mean, sure, this should have been released in October or whatever date is going around, but I think it was the same event regardless. As we might discuss, the rumors surrounding the VR headset and future Apple Glass are all being kind of thrown into the mud right now. So the idea that, oh, there was secretly the VR headset could have been announced 3 months ago. Sorry, guys, it's just not true.
Yeah. Now, I will say in October of last year, we got the 10.9-inch iPad with the Magic Keyboard Folio and the M2 iPad Pro and a new Apple TV 4K. And that was all via like press releases and such. I do feel like if there was going to be an event, like all of that together, it could have been the M2 story where they talk about the M2 iPad Pro, M2 Mac Mini, and then talk about the new MacBook Pros, and also threw a HomePod in there. That would have been a big event, honestly, if they did all of that.
Yeah, it's Tim Cook standing in a field holding a HomePod.
Cradling it like a baby, which is what I'll be doing when I get my 2 new HomePods. But
I'm very excited. I ordered 2 as well. I'm not a monster. I ordered the midnight color.
Listen, I got all black HomePods originally. I have 3 black OG HomePods. I still wish I had bought 4. Actually, no, I don't wish I had bought 4 because now I got the new HomePods.
Right.
But I'm trying white. In honor of Basic Apple Guy, I'm going to try a white one.
They'll be that color for at least a week.
I'm going to have a little like air pressurized canister here in the studio because I'm putting them in here. I'll just spray them every day, get the dust off of them or something.
We've talked about my mother's poor, dirty HomePod Mini in the past, and I think because they smoke, right, and I think a stray ash that was still lit must have landed on it because there is a burn mark in the middle of the HomePod.
Oh no!
This thing is slowly. I mean, it still plays music and it's amazing, like how it's just you look at it and you're like, oh, you poor thing.
Now I've had a white HomePod Mini on my nightstand for the last 4 or 5 months, and that's doing okay.
No cigarette ashes?
No smoking or anything. And I mean, I have 3 kids, which if it's something's going to get dirty, like the kids are going to do it. But they don't typically go in the bedroom, and they don't typically come in here in the studio, so I think it's safe.
If you put the HomePod Mini on top of an air purifier, it might be okay. Or like right next to it.
Right, that's an interesting strategy. Okay, I'm most excited about the HomePod, but we have to actually talk about the big ones. First of all, I just want to mention again, Black History Month, the Unity woven loop, very cool design this year. The word Unity is like woven into the fabric on the inside of the loop in this abstract text. Very cool, highlighting lots of content. Cool wallpaper coming too as well.
I like that Apple has started adopting basically an annual refresh of their Black History Month and Pride bands, and I wonder if they're going to start doing more kind of like either just holiday themed or social awareness themed type things like that.
Right, and the interesting thing is this: if there's also a new Apple Watch face. And typically there's a software update that will include the Apple Watch face. And some of the news this week is that 16.3 and watchOS 9.3, like all of that will be coming out as you listen to this episode, if you listen on release day, which everyone should, let's be honest, that it will be coming next week. And because the watch band and everything available January 24th, so it looks like all the updates will be coinciding with the release of this. So that'd be cool. Next week.
Yeah.
Now, big one, MacBook Pro. So press release came out. It was the MacBook Pro and the Mac Mini all on the same day. And the big story here, it's the same design as the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros from before. I have the M1 Pro 14-inch, which I think you do as well, right? You have the 14-inch?
Yes, I have the basically the base model, I think. I think I upgraded the storage maybe, but...
Right. And I basically did the same thing, and I've loved it. You know, it's an excellent laptop. The only hardware updates internally, obviously the chip story, we'll get to that in a second, but the HDMI port on these new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros actually capable of 8K video and 4K at 240 hertz. So if you ever wanted to do some kind of gaming on it, external monitor, HDMI port has been upgraded, Wi-Fi 6E, and you can get up to 8 terabytes of storage. I don't know if it was 8 terabytes with the last model, but it's a lot of storage.
I think 8 terabytes was there before, but yeah, it's an astronomical price. If you get it's $1,600 alone. I'm going to start pricing things in HomePods. That's
exactly right.
Yeah, that's 5 HomePods that you could get for that storage.
That's it. So aside from those hardware updates, we do have the chips. So the M2 Pro and M2 Max, these are new chips. M2 Pro has a 10 or 12 core CPU, up to 32 gigs of unified memory, and up to 19 GPU cores. The M2 Max, 12 core CPU, 96 gigabytes of unified memory. You can upgrade all the way up to 96 and a 38 core GPU. So again, powerful chips.
What do you think about Apple kind of just press releasing a major chip update? I mean, the M2 Pro and M2 Max, sure, I think people are kind of just waving their hands because, oh yeah, it's just a press release. But once you get into the details, and especially like when we saw that Geekbench score today, that might be real. Yeah. It's just, yeah, these things are pretty amazing. I mean, according to that Geekbench score, again, if it's real, the M2 Pro is more performant with 16 gigs of RAM than the base M1 Max in the Mac Studio. So
yeah, and
that's crazy.
It is crazy. I have the M1 Mac Studio, but I also feel like the power that these laptops, they're incredible. And one of the things that Apple's really bragging on too is the battery life because of the efficiency and power of these chips. Part of the 18-minute keynote video that they had on their YouTube channel, they had like 3 creators. One was doing development work, one was doing like 3D animation, and another one was doing like After Effects work. And they basically worked an entire day just on battery power, never plugging it in, and were able to accomplish incredible things just on that one charge. And so the power is incredible. Also, the battery life with the power is amazing. But I also feel like a keynote, it's weird because keynotes, Apple will like do ads for their keynotes on TikTok. Like you can go and Apple will say Apple event this date. And if you're doing an ad on TikTok, I don't think you are targeting like power users. I think you're targeting consumer, prosumer types.
Right.
And these kinds of specs are amazing, incredible, impressive. I don't know if a majority of people will even understand the numbers and get excited about it. You know what I mean?
It's just interesting to me that we just had CES a couple weeks ago, and
true.
AMD goes out on stage and says, "Look how cool we are. We just made a 4 nanometer processor on a new spec that beats out the Apple M1 Max by some percentage that." They're like, we did it. We beat Apple Silicon. It releases in March. And then Apple 2 weeks later says, here's the M1 or M2 Max today in January, 2 months before AMD. And AMD, I mean, someone that has to be hitting their head on the wall over there, just like, my good, their whole marketing strategy is just gone.
Right.
I'm sure they already had weeks worth of ads ready to go saying that they were better than Apple's best MacBook Pro. And it's just,
that's true.
You know, you have to think that they're over there just hitting this again because Apple's kind of killing it in this space, and it's hard to talk about because again they're already so good.
Right.
How much better does someone need it to be? But and then I know I'm going to get angry Twitter people telling me, but yeah, if you get this AMD chipset, yeah, but if you plug it in and have it in a freezer, yes, it'll outperform anything. But as soon as you unplug it, the battery will die in 8 minutes, and then there's nothing you can do with it.
Now, I think I'm going to put this article in this week's show notes. You had put it last time you were on the show to talk about, because this was AMD's presentation at CES. But they have this slide talking about Cinebench and versus the M1 Pro, which is not the M1 Max or M1 Ultra. So,
yeah, they even compared it to the M1 Pro, which again, if given that the leaps that the M2 Pro has made, like my goodness,
right? Well, and also like, why not M1 Max? Like, if you're really going to go after the laptop market, because Apple had M1 Max MacBook Pros before, but they were saying it's up to 34% faster than the M1 Pro. And so with the M2 Max now out, like this slide is moot. Like it's all these comparisons are old and don't apply. So incredibly powerful laptops. If you want that main machine, if you're doing like heavy video editing, CAD work, development, I mean, so glad that these machines are out there. Honestly, for me, with my M1 Pro, MacBook Pro, I rarely run into a processor choke. Like I typically don't have any issues with speed. And so I'll be keeping my M1 Pro 14-inch. I love it.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. I'm not upgrading, but see, Apple's marketing language here is really important. If you go and read the press release and go to Apple's main website, there's a couple places that they mention the M1 Pro, M1 Max comparison, but all of the language is, if you're coming from the best Intel processor MacBook Pro, or if you're coming from the best Intel processor desktop Mac Mini, this is the score that the M2 gives you. So they're obviously heavily targeting people who haven't upgraded to Apple Silicon yet, or haven't upgraded to these higher end MacBook Pros. Like, if you already have the redesigned MacBook Pros, your Apple's like, great if you upgrade, but we're not talking to you today. And I think that makes sense. I think that's a good strategy.
For sure. I'll be real with you all. I had not scheduled an annual physical for a long time, like I'm talking years, but I just didn't know where to turn. The idea of trying to call and figure out what doctors take my insurance, it just kept preventing me from actually making the appointment. Well, I finally decided it's a new year, #new me, I need to do it. And so I opened the free ZocDoc app. I searched in my area. I was able to scan my health insurance card so I know the doctors that I see will take my insurance. And I found a new primary care doctor and I scheduled my annual physical right there in the app. I didn't have to call anyone and I'm confident they'd take my insurance. My appointment's actually next Friday as I record. Listen, ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them and treat almost every condition under the sun. You can see patient reviews and ratings right there in the listing of doctors. I was able to choose like a 4.9 star doctor. It was close to my house. I know they take my insurance. It's great. And if you need a specialist or you're trying to schedule an eye exam, the ZocDoc app can help you with that too. After you choose a date and time, you get the confirmation email that the appointment has been set, and then you just go. You just go with the confidence knowing you're not going to have to make another appointment. So no more doctor roulette or scouring the internet for questionable reviews. With ZocDoc, you have a trusted guide to connect you to your favorite doctor you haven't met yet. Millions of people use ZocDoc's free app to find and book a doctor in their neighborhood who's patient-reviewed and fits their needs and schedule just right. And I'm one of them. I literally used it the other day to schedule my annual physical. So go to ZocDoc.com/AppleInsider and download the ZocDoc app for free. It's totally free. You don't have to pay for it. It's incredible. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. And I saw that to be true. I could have made an appointment like for the next day. That's ZocDoc.com/AppleInsider. ZocDoc.com/AppleInsider. My thanks to ZocDoc for helping me book my own physical. Now, also so compelling, along with the MacBook Pros, was announced an updated Mac Mini. I was happy. I actually called this the day before. I thought there were lots of rumors that everybody was like, press release coming tomorrow. John Prosser was saying it. Gurman was saying it. And I was like, maybe M2 iMac and M2 Mac Mini. So I was 50% right. So we also got the M2 Mac Mini. Great update for this. Also, the Mac Mini comes with an M2 Pro. Comes very interesting comparisons to the Mac Studio, which we'll get to in a second. But the M2 Mac Mini, you can get it with either chip, M2, M2 Pro. If you get it with the M2 Pro chip, you can get 4 Thunderbolt ports, which is great. The one thing though, like when you're looking at the Mac Mini compared to some of the other machines, an M2 Pro Mac Mini would be so great for so many creators. That would do great at video editing. Again, I edit video 4K on an M1 Pro MacBook Pro. An M2 Pro Mac Mini would be awesome. No SD card though. Like if you want to plug in an SD card, you're still going to need a hub for your Mac Mini just for the SD card.
I would argue, and again, this ignoring the Mac Studio because I understand it has the UHS-2 thing in the front.
Yeah.
But for a desktop computer that's stationary, I think you're more likely to have a Thunderbolt dock, and it's a little more excusable.
Yeah,
it's understandable. Like, yes, it would be nice to have that little SD card slot already in the computer, but if we're talking about the type of person who needs an SD card slot in the first place, they probably already have a Thunderbolt dock. And
for sure,
I want to get into that a little bit. Like, so the Mac Mini is an interesting computer, and I was talking to Andrew about this. This kind of blows the iMac out of the water. Like, why even bother anymore? And it's like, well, think about it. We're the kind of people who already have advanced desktop setups. You know, we already have a monitor, keyboard, mouse, Thunderbolt dock, all of this stuff. You know, we go to the store and want a Mac, we go buy a Mac Mini. Yeah, we're only spending $600 for that base model, $1,200 for the M2 Pro, or $1,300, whatever it is. That's it. You know, maybe we get an accessory or something, but that's all we have to do. But someone entering the market, a kid just graduating high school or going to college or something, or parents who are getting their first home computer, just, you know, there's all kinds of scenarios. Do you want to tell them, yeah, this amazing M2 processor and like this desktop is only $599, but you also need a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, and you know, and it's so like I think the value proposition differs based on who you're talking to, as usual. But in this case, for me, and I wanted to see if you had the same opinion, for someone who's, say, coming from a Windows PC that they bought in 2010 to do taxes on once a year. And they have a monitor, mouse, and keyboard and stuff already. Maybe they upgrade that every now and then, but they haven't touched this computer in years as far as upgrading it. And they're looking at the market like, what do I buy? I would say go get this M2. Yeah, $600. Best thing you can get on the market at that price, I think.
It is amazing that the Mac Mini with an M2 chip comes, like you just said, starts at $600. Education discount brings it down to $500. I mean, this is an M2 chip. Like, this is super powerful. It's going to last you a very, very long time. That situation you just said. Plus, I mean, if you just wanted like a home server, like I actually have a Mac Mini, runs Homebridge. I run Transloader and Downy on it for downloading videos. It's an Intel one from 2018. It's fine, but man, to upgrade to an M2 chip for $600, totally future-proof that setup for the next 10 years. Like, very, very compelling at, I think, the lower end price points.
Even with 256 gigs of memory, who cares?
Yeah, it's
iCloud
fine.
exists. If you're not, I'm talking to the person, like I just said, who's doing taxes or letting kids do their homework. It's a Mac, so it has multi-user support. You're spending about as much as a decent iPad,
right?
But now you have a central home hub where everyone has an account. They can just put their finger on the Touch ID if they have the keyboard, log in, and access all of their iCloud data on the machine. Like it's the like I have my sister has a family and they have a couple of kids and stuff, and it's like if I was recommending a computer today, like it would be that. That would be perfect.
Yeah, it was interesting you said iPad too, because I was just thinking the iPad Air is $599. You get 64 gigabytes of storage, and it's an iPad, not a Mac. And so if you needed something for schoolwork, maybe you need something for multi-users, which an iPad does not do multi-users. If you were going to buy one or the other, in which the iPad Air also doesn't come with a keyboard or a trackpad or an Apple Pencil, it's also $599. I mean, if your choice is I have $600 to get a machine, I already have a monitor, or I can at least buy cheap versions of those, $599, you can get a Mac with an M2 chip or an iPad Air. Like, crazy that that's a choice you can make today.
Yeah, I think this is going to sell a lot of machines. I think this is going to be a lot of new first Macs for people, and it's such an excellent option again, because like I know people are going to complain about that entry storage, but again, in today's thing, unless you're doing 4K video or something, 256 is fine when you're relying on iCloud. Pay for the higher iCloud storage, you're pretty much good to go.
Now, the one article I was most interested in that we did was a comparison with the M2 Pro Mac Mini versus the Mac Studio. And if the M2 Pro Mac Mini had existed a year ago, this would have been the choice I was making. Like if I was going to choose, because I have the Mac Studio sitting right here. It has the M1 Max. I upgraded, I have 2 terabytes of storage and 64 gigs of memory. But if you were just looking at these two machines with similar specs, I love this chart we have on here. The M2 Pro Mac Mini, $1,700. M1 Max Mac Studio, $2,000. So we're talking a $300 difference. You do get more GPU cores with those price points at those configurations. Mac Mini will have 16 core GPU, Mac Studio 24 core. Put the RAM at the same level, 32 gigs. You do get Wi-Fi 6E on the new Mac Mini, but I'm going to hardwire my desktop anyways. I got Ethernet running to it, so not a big deal. Keeping the storage the same, 512 gigabytes. But on the Mac Studio, you do get an additional 2 USB-C ports on the front and that SD card slot. And if someone was choosing, they wanted this level of performance. They wanted the 32 gigs of RAM. They wanted some significant GPU cores because they're doing some video editing, not super intense, but pretty decent. That $300 difference. I mean, Apple is so good at this, like getting things so close.
The price ladder.
The price ladder is so like they nailed this. Like I would go with the Mac Studio 100%.
So you mean the Mac Mini?
No, I would go with the Mac Studio.
Oh, because of the USB ports?
For $300 to get the SD card slot, more GPUs, you have the 2 USB-C ports on the front. Now that I've had a Mac Studio for whatever it is, 7 or 8 months, I use those front ports and SD card slot a ton. And I would,
So again, this all comes down to use case. This is interesting because I literally wrote this the day that we got the information about the Mac Mini. A lot has come out since, and I think I would even change which configuration because now we know that the 12-core M2 Pro is at least technically more powerful CPU side than the M1 Max. So throw in that 12 core, and now you're price matched, 19 versus 19.
Okay.
And but with more RAM, because again, that score is 16 gigs of RAM for that higher end processor for the Mac Mini.
Right.
But our configuration that we've have priced out has 32 gigs of RAM, so you have even more. So at $19.99 for both, you have a more powerful CPU. You have 32 gigs of RAM. So I think that comparison's even harder now because, again, like you said, you use those extra ports. But
right, if you don't,
I think that the performance is worth the ports because you can always add ports. You can always get a dock, but that performance you're never going to get back. Now, also, it's hard to talk about this in benchmarks. Benchmarks are meaningless when we're talking about Apple's other things, the Neural Engine and Media Engine.
Right.
The Neural Engine on the M2 Pro will be more advanced than the one on the M1 Max. But the Media Engine, for saying enough technical terms here, the Media Engine is more advanced on the M1 Max because it doubles the video encode decodes that's available. So encode decode engine is more advanced on the M2 Pro, but only has one of them versus the M1 Max having twice as many. So it's a weird conversation, but if you're working in video, you're getting the Mac Studio. Absolutely.
Right. And I think that's the biggest deal. I think Mac Studio really geared towards video. I mean, if you do audio, you might be dealing with SD cards and stuff like that too. The size difference is significant too, though. I mean, you can get very, very close performance, and the dimensions are hilarious in this comparison because both the Mac Mini and Mac Studio had the same width and length, which is 7.7 inches, but the height of the Mac Mini is 1.4 inches and the Mac Studio is 3.7.
It's all fan. It's all fan.
All fan. So that's kind of funny.
We could definitely beat this to death. I think the most interesting aspect of this is, like you said, the price ladder that Apple's created from $599 all the way up to what's a maxed out Mac Mini, $4,400,
something like that. Yeah.
And then of course the Mac Studio I think goes up to $6,400. So
with the M1 Ultra,
yeah. So it's interesting that with these processors that Apple has built in these computers, there's only two cases. We're only talking about the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio, but use cases from $600 to 10x to $6,000.
Yes.
And I just find that pretty impressive, and I like that it's so close in the middle that $1,500 to $2,500 price range is such an argumentative standpoint for someone going in to buy it because it gives them more choices. It gives you so many more options, and you get down to that nitty gritty of what exactly do I need here. And I'm excited to see what the M2 does in the Mac Studio.
Yeah,
probably in the spring, maybe.
That would be a fast turnaround. I mean, that would be a year. 1 year.
Speaking of fast turnarounds, I did want to bring this one up real quick. I just wrote an article right before I came in about DigiTimes. They're semi-reliable. They have a source saying that the M3 is coming to the MacBook Air this, 2023 calendar. And I'm just over here my head's exploding because the M2 MacBook Air came out last July. That's literally a 13-month turnaround or literally a year. And no way.
Wow.
I went into that article just screaming no, this is insane. This is as crazy as Mark Gurman saying that every Mac was going to get upgraded last year. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. A Mac Studio upgrade to M2 Ultra seems too soon. I don't think it would come in the spring. Well, I did say spring just now, but maybe not. Maybe the fall. Maybe that 16 to 18 month turnaround. But it's coming, right? Because Apple's not apparently 3 nanometers already in production. Apple isn't going to hold out. A17 for the iPhone 15 is coming this fall, and that's 3 nanometers. So M3 is either December of this year or early next year. So that M2 Ultra's got to come out, and the only thing running it is the Studio. So
I think it's going to be a big year for Apple. I know a lot of news before was coming recession, yada, yada, supply chain, might be whatever.
The word was muted. This is going to be a muted release cycle for Apple. and as soon as I saw that, I said, no.
Before we're even 3 weeks into the new year, Apple drops all of this, including the big HomePod. We got to talk about it. Yep. One last thing before we get to it, because I thought this was hilarious. We did a whole, or someone tweeted the trade-in value of a spec'd out 2019 Intel Mac Pro,
yes,
which at the time, if you had bought it, would have been over $50,000. 50 grand, like car territory pricing. If you go to trade that in directly to Apple today, you'll get about $950 for that $50,000 computer, which I mean, I get it. Like Apple probably doesn't even want it back. That's why.
If you take a Ferrari to a junkyard and crush it, you'll get $400 out of it. So I that's my equivalence here. When you do the trade-in program at Apple, you want to get some amount of money out of something that you don't deem worth trying to sell on the market. And and Apple actually maxes out their trade-in program at $1,250. It doesn't matter what you have.
Right.
I don't know like why the person did the exercise of let's see if we can trade in this $53,000 computer. I don't know why they would bother. It's hilarious the result, but still it's just the angry responses don't make sense to me because I mean, I've gone to GameStop with this was back in the day. I think it was like a no, I'm sorry. It was a Nintendo Wii and like 15 video games, controllers, accessories.
You're going to get $10 for that.
$10 store credit, I think. They wouldn't even give you cash. So that's what we're talking about here. Like trade-in is nonsense, but that was a good shock story. I like that.
Yeah. And also, if you bought a $50,000 computer 4 years ago, you probably don't need to trade something in to buy a $2,000 computer. You know what I mean? Like
Apple Silicon, man. I mean, it is kind of compelling, especially with those media engines. The fact that the Afterburner card was basically garbage after the media engine was announced for the M1 Pro. Like just looking at that Mac Pro just kind of makes you feel a little sad.
Yeah, it's true. Most exciting for me news this week was that the big HomePod is back, which so excited. Did not expect this. Does not have all like the screen and smart, stuff like we had talked, at least on HomeKit Insider, we had alluded to the rumors of that. But I'm just glad it's back. Big HomePod. It's powered by the S7 chip. Interesting, it's not an A series chip, but
for reference, the HomePod Mini uses the S5 chip. So.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. Thank you for that. That's good. Matter and Thread are built in for your HomeKit smart home needs. The U1 ultra wideband chip is included, like the HomePod Mini, so you can do that nice handoff. The screen on top is a little larger.
Don't know about the larger top screen. I think it's even smaller. The animation goes all the way to the edge.
Oh.
So if you look at your HomePod right now, if you have one nearby,
I'm looking at it right now.
The top kind of peeks out a little bit. The glass is actually kind of sticking out of the top. The new HomePod adapts the HomePod Mini design of having kind of a concave top where it kind of sinks in. So there's more fabric around the top edge. And the physical width of the HomePod didn't change, but the width of the top fabric is thicker and it curves around the top glass.
Gotcha.
So it's actually a little smaller, but it's an illusion because the animation now goes all the way to the edge, whereas it did not before. So
like the HomePod Mini, right? The HomePod Mini goes all the way to the edge.
Basically the same top glass as the HomePod Mini. Yeah, just bigger.
Got it. Okay. It also has a built-in temperature and humidity sensor, which we will get to because that is also getting enabled in the HomePod Mini with 16.3. Two lesser things on this new big HomePod as opposed to the original. There's 2 less tweeters and 2 less microphones built in, which we'll have to see. There's been some early reviews. I think The Verge actually got like early access to it. They said it basically sounds the same. So I don't think there's going to be some kind of decrease in quality.
Okay. Well, I wanted to comment on that.
Okay.
I don't know if you read this. The Verge got to visit some portion of Apple's studio, like a secret. I don't know if they were in New York or LA this time, whatever. Do you remember the first time they revealed the HomePod? I think that was in New York. They went to like a secret apartment and listened to the HomePod.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is the same situation, but I wouldn't take any stock by what they say about the sound quality here, because they said they can't tell you everything that they saw on this tour. They can only mention one room that they visited. This is all hush hush, and it was a single HomePod sitting on a stand, and they got to listen to a stereo pair in like a very isolated circumstance without any comparison to the original set. So if someone just took you to a random room and started playing music, are you going to really be able to say, oh yeah, that sounds better?
True.
Anyway, I'm just going to say we'll get into it with the comparison because I discovered a few fun little facts here. I expect it personally to sound better, but we'll see. Yeah,
and I have a feeling they do too, because some part of the software updates has been like better sound, especially for spoken word stuff. But we'll get into the software in a second. One other hardware difference, and this I was a little disappointed in, the new HomePod has Wi-Fi N instead of Wi-Fi AC. And I look back,
Wi-Fi 4.
Yeah, and the original HomePod did have Wi-Fi AC, which is faster, newer spec. Not even the newest. It's not Wi-Fi 6E. I think Wi-Fi AC is closer to the equivalent of Wi-Fi 6. But considering this, you can't connect it by Ethernet.
AC is the old naming convention. I think It's been renamed Wi-Fi 5, and N is Wi-Fi 4. So we jumped back a generation.
For a device that doesn't have an Ethernet port, like you can only connect this thing to Wi-Fi, it seems strange to downgrade the Wi-Fi chip from AC to N. Probably won't have much of an effect on your actual day-to-day use of the device, but still just seems like a weird omission. I imagine this has something to do with margins. Maybe that's also like the tweeter mic situation. Although they did redesign the entire inside of the HomePod. Like it is actually a physically different layout. So maybe that's why.
I will argue the processor might be to blame because that's an Apple Watch. That's the full Apple Watch SoC. And if you look at the HomePod Mini, it also uses 802.11n Wi-Fi, which I believe is the Wi-Fi standard used by the Apple Watch as well. So this is a limitation of the chipset, not so much a price cutting thing, but I think Apple decided that since it's only doing audio over Wi-Fi, the only thing Wi-Fi is used for is getting information from the internet to the HomePod, and it's not playing video, it's not rendering a video game or even a web page. It's literally just playing audio. So I think way more bandwidth than you would ever need, probably gigs of bandwidth versus Bluetooth, right? So It's way more than what Bluetooth has to offer, but still overkill for what the HomePod does. It's a weird spec to have, but I think it's fine.
I was feverishly Googling to hopefully prove you wrong about the Apple Watch Wi-Fi, but you are actually correct. The S7 chip, which was found in the Apple Watch Series 7, only goes up to Wi-Fi N, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And so like you're saying, with a system on it...
And the HomePod Mini is also...
Right, and so the HomePod Mini's been Wi-Fi N the whole time. If it's a system on a chip, yes, the Wi-Fi thing's probably built in. So it makes sense from a technical standpoint. Again, like real life application is probably fine. Anyway, I'm excited about it. You can pair two of these, obviously like you always have. You cannot pair a new HomePod with an old HomePod for a stereo pair. You can only pair two HomePods of like generation. Can't do a Gen 1, Gen 2. There's also no home theater kind of setup that you can do like with rear speakers as HomePod minis. None of that. Stereo pair is all you get. You do get Dolby Atmos. And I will say I used two OG HomePods with an Apple TV in like living room setup for a while. And it did sound amazing. Like it sounded incredible. I imagine these will sound also incredible, maybe even better. I love that this thing is back. I went back and looked at the TechCrunch article from March 2021. Apple gave TechCrunch a direct statement. And I do think it's funny. They told TechCrunch the HomePod, OG HomePod, or however they called it, was discontinued. Like Apple said the word discontinued. Now, you could say they meant the first generation is discontinued, but the second generation is not, and that's coming later, but Apple didn't say that. It does really feel like, though, that this is one of the few products, maybe the only, I tweeted trying to see if anybody could recall another product like this, where Apple said, this is discontinued, seriously implying that the line of this product is done, and we are only focusing on the HomePod Mini, and then for a new version to come out less than 2 years later, to great fanfare, it seems like. So I think it's interesting, but I'm glad it's back.
Apple never announced it, but MagSafe comes to mind.
MagSafe was the other one, yeah.
Scissor switches.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and the keyboard. They abandoned technologies and returned to them, but it's under different circumstances. And I would be willing to make the argument that this is not the same HomePod. This is a different product, just has the same name, because the internal reconfiguration of this it's insane. It's a completely different speaker. You could argue, okay, so the 4-inch main driver is still there. Yes, that is still the same sized main speaker, but has fewer tweeters. But each tweeter has its own, what's the word for that? Pneumonium, whatever magnet. It has its own,
I don't know.
whatever magnet system. So the tweeters are going to have more power per tweeter, better, higher frequencies and stuff like that. The rearrangement of everything internally also means that you're probably going to get better response. Apple also said there's a lot of new technologies in here that didn't seem to appear in the first HomePod. Again, if you read my comparison, it's difficult to determine what's new because Apple didn't draw any direct comparisons to the original model. They mentioned what they called an all-new system sensor, which I don't know what that means. Does it mean that the system sensor is new, or this is a new version of the system sensor?
I don't know.
But I went and dragged through all of Apple's PR about the original HomePod, and there was never mentioned anything called a system sensor. So I'm assuming that this is a new device. And basically, now there is a separate computational system specifically for sensing audio as it is being played and adjusting it for better playback, which the other HomePod did computational audio using microphones. But I wanted to point out that this is different because this HomePod is also doing computational audio using microphones and has the system sensor for even more advanced computational adjustments. So
that's interesting. And it's also like the AirPods Pro and AirPods Max, I believe, which do kind of like that adaptive EQ, taking the internal measurements of where your ear is, like in the cup of AirPods Max and how it sounds there. And it's making calibrations to the EQ and settings based on that. So maybe, that included as well as what the microphones are picking up. But anyway.
It also looks like the microphones have been moved. I can't tell from Apple's diagram here, but either they're lower in the HomePod or more spread out, but there are fewer of them.
Right.
They were previously around a ring at the center, but now the tweeters point at an upward diagonal instead of outward, straight. Like they were almost 90-degree pointed straight outward in the original. So a lot of small adjustments, but if you deal with audio at all, the smallest percent change in speaker direction makes a huge difference in how audio is reproduced. So,
for sure.
I can't go into this thinking like, oh yeah, it's going to sound identical or similar. You know what I mean?
This episode is brought to you by Collide. Traditional endpoint security tools can make your workplace feel like a surveillance state, turn users and the IT team into adversaries, and ultimately drive your employees to work on unsecured personal devices. This is not good, but it doesn't have to be this way. Collide is a device security solution built around honest security. Their philosophy is that employees aren't your biggest security risk, they're your biggest allies, and your relationship with them should be based on transparency and informed consent. Collide works by notifying your employees of security issues via Slack and giving them step-by-step instructions on how to resolve those problems themselves. For instance, maybe they save some passwords or secret keys in a plain text file on their desktop. Well, Collide will see that. Collide knows that's not a good practice. You shouldn't do that. And so they'll get a private DM in Slack saying, hey, here's a better way to do it. Here's the step-by-step instructions on how to more securely save those passwords. So for IT and security teams, Collide provides the right level of visibility for Mac, Windows, and Linux devices, and it can answer questions about your fleet security that traditional MDMs can't. You can meet your security goals without compromising your values. Visit collide.com/AppleInsider to find out how. And if you follow that link, they'll hook you up with a goodie bag just for activating a free trial. Free trial, free goodie bag. That's KOLIDE.com/AppleInsider. Collide.com/AppleInsider. And that link is in the episode show notes. Our thanks to Collide for sponsoring this episode. They're also interesting, they are including a temperature and humidity sensor in the new HomePod. And with this 16.3 update that's coming to the HomePod Mini, if you remember, there was a teardown back when the HomePod Mini launched and a temperature and humidity sensor was discovered inside but unusable by the user. Well, the 16.3 update coming presumably next week will enable that sensor, temperature and humidity, in both the HomePod Mini and now in the big HomePod, and those sensors will be surfaced in HomeKit in your home app, and you'll be able to use them as cards and automations in whatever. Love that. Love that the HomePod Mini mystery from 2 years ago about what is this sensor doing in here, now it is enacted with 16.3, and there's a bunch of other improvements. Real quick, let me just run down. 16.3, you're also going to be able to set recurring home automations just by speaking to Siri. Andrew O'Hara actually has a video on it. He installed the release candidate, and you can do that right now. But if you say, like, open the blinds every day at 9 a.m., it will actually create that recurring automation for you just using Siri with the HomePod. Find My, if you have family and friends in the Find My app and you're already sharing location, you'll be able to ask your HomePods, HomePod Mini or the new HomePod on 16.3, where your family member is or partner, and your HomePod will tell you before you couldn't do it. Also audio improved for spoken content like podcasts, and also remastered and ambient noise can be included in like scenes and automations with the HomePod. So all of those software updates coming to both HomePod Mini and this new HomePod in 16.3.
These are fun. I'm glad the other HomePods are getting these updates. 16.3 is also coming to the original HomePod, so that also includes audio improvements for speech,
right.
The remastered noises. You'll be able to give the Siri automation commands. The only thing the original HomePod is not getting from this update is temperature and humidity because it doesn't have the sensor.
It doesn't have the sensor, right.
I want to know the conversations around that sensor in the HomePod Mini, because why now? Why has it been laying dormant for years? Was it some sort of software issue that they couldn't get right? Was there some sort of support problem? Was it Matter? Did Matter somehow activate this sensor? I just wonder what the conversation was there and why it took them this long to bring it up, because I think it's amazing. Now, you want a HomePod in every room, not only because it provides audio and Siri and all these controls, but now in the Home app, you can see per room temperature and humidity and have automations based on that. Run a dehumidifier if it gets too humid in here. Or turn on the in-room heater or in-room air conditioner if it gets to a certain temperature, and then turn it back off. Like, I find that really great. And before, I don't know if you've ever looked at this, but Ecobee sells individual room sensors that do this.
I have them.
They're like $50 a piece or something.
Yes, it includes one depending on which Ecobee model you buy. So I have like one additional, but they're expensive.
Yeah, so like just double the price, you can get an entire HomePod that does it. So interesting.
Yeah, I wonder, one of the other interesting things about the temp and humidity sensor is third-party apps will not be able to see that data. So like if you open the Eve app or other smart home apps that work with HomeKit, Eve, again, we'll just use that as an example, you cannot access the temperature and humidity information in the Eve app. It is only available in the Home app. So like you were asking, I'm not sure if it's some kind of weird HomeKit or Matter thing, thread maybe, but it is strange that third parties don't get access to temperature and humidity, which is pretty standard like HomeKit information.
I'm glad that this has a thread radio. I'm glad that it's technically a Matter hub, whatever that translates to.
Right.
I don't know if that'll really mean anything for users of HomeKit devices already, but it could be important later. Definitely happy that this exists. HomePod returns, not the HomePod 2, not but it's the HomePod.
just HomePod. I'm super excited. I got two white ones, like I said, coming in. Oh, and one other feature for smart home triggers, like if you're asking your HomePod to do something like change the temperature in this room or turn on the lights in another room that I'm not in. If it's something that you can't visually see in the room that you're speaking to the HomePod in, it'll actually be a confirmation tone to let you know that it was successful. And so if you ask to change the temperature, but you're not near your thermostat to see if it actually changed, your HomePod will give you a nice little sound. Andrew O'Hara also covers that in a video to let you know that it actually worked. It actually went through.
I have a thinking experiment here for you.
Yes.
I have a Sonos set up, kind of. I remember back in the day, 2016 era, everyone was like, "Ooh, Apple should buy Sonos. It's the Apple of speakers or whatever." This is prior to HomePod, I believe, because that was 2018. I was like, I need a home theater system. I'm going to go for Sonos. They seem smart. And then a couple of years later, they do this super deep partnership with Amazon, and I cry a little bit. But anyway, so I have that era. I don't know what generation you call it, but it's that era of Sonos. It's pre Alexa voice control, soundbar, subwoofer, Play 1 speakers, right?
Yeah.
As my or Play 3 speakers as my living room setup. And then I have a bedroom theater system, because why not, of a slightly newer Play bar that's AirPlay 2.
AirPlay 2, yeah.
And I have two Play 1s hooked up to that, but no subwoofer. And after Apple announced this new HomePod, it got it in my brain again of, do I want to ditch Sonos? Is it finally time? And I'm going to set up I got two HomePods. I'm going to set them up in stereo pair in a way that would be good for TV audio in the living room and test it out against the Sonos system. Obviously, I'm aware that they're not going to be able to reproduce the audio of that subwoofer. There's nothing I can do with Apple's HomePods to do that. I wish there was like some sort of weird hack that would let me throw in a third-party subwoofer, but there's just no way to do it. But then it got me thinking, why not just do HomePod minis for the Apple TV in the bedroom? So
you could.
So anyway, I wanted to ask you, like, what would it take for you to use HomePods as your main theater system? Like, would Apple have to release a sound bar or maybe partner third party wise and come out with a Apple approved sound system or something like that?
So I have one room where I have like a whole 7.1 set up with like ceiling speakers.
Nice.
And I'm not changing that. Like that, like if anything, I'll upgrade a receiver. Maybe I'll upgrade the ceiling speakers in the future. But like I did all that work moving into this house and building it.
You literally built your house around this theater.
Literally did. And so like that's not going anywhere. Now, in my bedroom, I do have a Sonos Beam and a Sonos Sub Mini. Sounds great. I love it. I also like that I can mount the Sonos Beam, and I've done this with an Arc in another room too. It's mounted right under the TV. Like it actually connects to the TV mount. There's no additional thing connected to the wall. Like it's all just self-contained. It looks really clean.
Nice.
And, they make like wall mounts for HomePods and stuff like that, but it's just not a clean of look. And I don't think it's as discreet. Now, they sound great. Again, like I used 2 OG HomePods in a like home living room setup and it sounded really good. I do think a standalone subwoofer, if you wanted to make like a real close to theater experience, I do think you need a dedicated subwoofer. I don't know if Apple would ever do a dedicated sub, but like you're saying, like it's really hard. The HomePods, even the big HomePods get really close. It sounds really good, but man, the Sonos sub, I have the big one paired with an Arc. It just sounds amazing. And I do think Sonos does things like the Sonos Move, which I have one of those outside in the pool area. And that, again, I don't know if Apple would ever make a battery-powered HomePod that you can just like take off a MagSafe charger, which I would be all about. If Apple did something like that, it would be amazing to have a HomePod that taps to a MagSafe charger. You use it like a regular HomePod, but then you could pick it up and carry it around. Would be amazing. But like those kinds of unique use cases, it'll still have me foot in each system, like Sonos over here, Apple over here. I wish I could use Sonos in like HomeKit scenes. It's just, you can't do it. I've tried it multiple times. And so for that reason, I would love to be all in on HomePod because the HomePod works seamlessly in HomeKit scenes and shortcuts and all that kind of stuff. So I do love it. I don't think Apple's going to make those niche use cases like a standalone sub or battery-powered portable speaker that actually sounds great. And so I'll be footing both worlds for a long time, I think.
So I know it's a moot point, but I think I've kind of made the decision. I really want to go all in on HomePod and Apple just because,
Sure.
Again, I want to reduce my ecosystem footprint, I guess is what you could say. So yeah, I think I might go ahead and downgrade my bedroom system to 2 HomePods. I don't know if you call it downgrading. I don't need a bunch of noise for the bedroom. I'm just watching TV.
Sure.
And I honestly did the math, and I think I could literally sell those 3 speakers for hundreds of dollars and buy 1 HomePod mini and be there. Like I'll make a little bit of money. But the living room setup, sadly, I personally want to get rid of Sonos because I just don't want a proprietary connected system like that anymore. I kind of want to go to maybe a HomeKit receiver that just routes dumb speakers, and then anytime I want to upgrade my audio, I just move up get better speakers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that's my future. Like Sonos is nice, but Apple's done such a great job for HomePods that I think I just want to lean into that and hope that maybe they give us some kind of HomePod soundbar in the future and subwoofer. But I did want to show you this because I was shopping around yesterday and I found this silly,
this is amazing.
Silly battery pack. I love it. Tell me what you see, Stephen.
This is the Mission battery base for HomePod Mini. And I feel like I remember you actually doing this when HomePod Mini first came out with like external battery packs, like USB ones. But this is a bespoke HomePod Mini little stand. You put the HomePod Mini in this little hourglass looking stand. Cable management, you run the HomePod Mini cable. It coils underneath this little stand, plugs into this thing, assuming it has a battery inside, up to 9 hours it said, and you charge this little stand. But then you can take this HomePod Mini wherever you go. You turn on the base. There's a power button on the Mission battery base. You turn it on and it powers the HomePod Mini. And now you have a portable HomePod Mini that can go anywhere at least your Wi-Fi network carries. So that's funny.
It's pretty hilarious, but also like only $42.
Yeah. I mean, not bad. There's other ones on here too. I just found a Plus ACC for HomePod Mini battery. It's a little more of a symmetrical base, a little more low profile, but also kind of cool. It's kind of a cool idea.
I am all for weird accessories. Guys, if you ever found like weird HomePod or AirPod accessories, throw them our way. Like I love 100%. Finding the most random Apple adjacent accessories I can.
For sure.
I have a snail holder for my HomePod Mini for the kitchen. It turns the HomePod, it's like a shell for the snail, and it's a little wooden snail. Yeah.
That's hilarious. That's funny. All right, real quick, I do want to mention most likely next week we're going to see 16.3 launch. Obviously, these updates to HomePod and HomePod Mini, but iPhone, tvOS, Apple Watch, all of that stuff, I'm really hoping for some serious bug fixes. I still experience lots of bugs on my iPhone 14 Pro, but also found in the release candidate code of 16.3, there's a change referring to the, again, phantom Apple classical app. Apparently, there's a line of text now in the release candidate software that says, instead of, it used to be, quote, a shortcut to Apple Classical, now refers to, quote, open in Apple Music Classical, that maybe Apple has internally changed the name of the app or how they're referring to it. And there's also a line of code that says, quote, explore this artist in the app designed for classical music. So it seems like Apple is still thinking about the Apple Music Classical app. I joked just earlier this morning that maybe the Apple Music Classical app will only be available on the big HomePod screen. I don't know. But
Steven, as another part of 16.3, I did want to ask you a question. Are you looking forward to the new architecture update for HomeKit?
Listen.
Because it's coming back.
It's coming back.
Yes.
I am just, let me caution everyone. It was not good before. I would not do it on day one.
You couldn't reverse it, right? You're still in the new architecture,
No,
right?
yeah, you can't reverse it. No, I'm still there. I reset my light switches every other week. It's fine.
I'm in it too. I don't think it's architecture related, but I keep having my Nano Leafs do the thing where they're just like, nope, sorry, not responding.
Exactly.
I'm going to blame the architecture though and hope that it gets fixed in the next update, because that would be very nice.
I'm hoping so too. Screen time has been a mess with me and my kids' devices. Just so many weird bugs. So hopefully 16.3 solves everything. Maybe there'll be like an Apple Music Classical release alongside. Apple do that sometimes. Like, hey, 16.3, and you can now download the Apple Music Classical app. We'll see. One last thing before we go. This is, again, I don't want to complain about Twitter all the time, but apparently Twitter and Elon Musk has cut off access to third-party apps. And so all the apps like Tweetbot, Twitterific, all these great Twitter apps that have existed for many, many years, they are now unusable. You can't use a third-party app to access Twitter. Again, this is likely a push so that people will see the ads that Elon is trying to put on the platform. It's just sad because I'm so torn, because when all this news was coming out about the M2 Pro and M2 Max, the HomePod, my reaction, and really the only place I went to tweet about it and to read what others thought about it, was Twitter. That's where I went to see all this stuff. And I didn't think of Mastodon at the time. I went to Mastodon like days later and was just like, this is not the place still for this stuff. Like, I just don't think it's going to be that. But it just seems like Twitter is bent on making it the most annoying platform to use. Like, they added a For You tab and it separated it from the following. So now when you open the app, it's this weird For You tab and you're seeing tweets from people you don't follow and they haven't been retweeted by anyone you follow. It's just trying to show you things that Twitter thinks you like, even though they are making it so hard to still like the platform. Like, it's still where I go to tweet about Apple stuff and the new releases and what I'm excited about. And so it's just sad and I'm torn. I hope they revert this. I mean, Twitter has reverted several things. It just, have announced and then reverted just in the last several months since Elon has taken over. But the third-party app thing would be a huge loss. I hope they change it.
Charge me money for it. Put ads in the third-party apps. I don't care. I didn't use the third-party apps to get away from ads. I mean, it was part of it, but the experiences were so much better. I mean, yeah. I am struggling because I'm using the main Twitter client, and I am struggling to do my Twitter completionist nonsense. I know I shouldn't use Twitter that way, but I do. And it's like, where was I last? And then I pick up my iPhone, and it's a different spot than where it is on my iPad mini. And it's just infuriating. Like, so I have to scroll to the top and then scroll down backwards until I see what I saw before. And then like, okay, I'm good. And then, you have to go to the following tab. Sometimes I accidentally end up in the For You tab. I'm like, what am I seeing? Like, what am I looking at? And it just don't understand where all these tweets are coming from. Who are these people? It's like For You is the opposite. It is not for me. It is the worst possible pile of information I've ever seen. And like, go to following. I'm like, oh, here we are. This is the Twitter I'm actually here for. And it's so weird that it's built that way. It feels like the worst experiment in history as far as like social media goes. And it sucks. It's bad. And I did want to mention, so one of my little use cases for Twitter is I'll have a video game on. I have my iPad mini on a table next to my couch.
As you do.
And I leave the display. I leave the display on. I've learned that you can trust that it's not going to burn in anymore, so I just leave it running. And I'll have Overcast on one side in a split view, playing whatever podcast I'm listening to, podcast art is nice and big, on half the screen. And the other half of the split view was a Twitter client and now is the Twitter client. And the difference is maddening because I'll look over and be like, oh, I'm going to refresh. I'm going to see what's new. You pull down the refresh, pauses the podcast.
Really?
Yeah, because the audio playing the badoop thing pauses.
My word.
And then I scroll up. I'm like, okay. So I go hit play on the podcast again, start scrolling up, pass a video. It's not even playing audio from the video, but I pass a video. Pauses the podcast. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. This is not how, it's so bad. It's such a bad experience.
I hope it changes. I hope Twitter gets better again.
If this is the Twitter we have to deal with, that's fine. I'm not one of these people that's like, I hate Elon Musk. I don't like what he's doing. I don't like the business decisions he's making. I think it's all a mess, but also just make Twitter better. I don't want to see it burn and die. I like this platform. Make it better. Do good. Give us a reason why you're taking away all of these good features and make us want to stick around,
Yeah, I agree. But I don't want to end on a down note. So I'll just say again, HomePod is back. Very exciting. Very exciting. And I ordered getting them February 3rd, launch day. I just looked. You can still order a big HomePod and get it February 3rd. So it doesn't seem like they're super constrained supply-wise. I'm hoping people buy them.
I wouldn't expect it to get constrained.
I want people to buy them though, so they don't make it go away again. They need to keep making these. So as
right.
Again, Basic Apple Guy said, we're just going to get a subscription. Just send me one a month, maybe one every other month. I probably don't need that many.
Right.
And we'll just keep making them, Apple. It's good stuff. Anyway, let us know if you got a HomePod, if you got a new Mac Mini, MacBook Pro, any of the things that Apple announced this week. You can tweet at Wes and myself. All of that info is in the show notes. Of course, you could support the show and get an ad-free version at patreon.com/AppleInsider or directly in Apple Podcasts. Of course, listen to the Apple Insider Daily to hear some familiar voices on there as well. And tune into HomeKit Insider on Monday. Andrew and I go even deeper on a lot of the HomeKit stuff from all this new HomePod excitingness. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.